This is not a place for a Russian, Iranian, Syrian, Chinese sympathizer. DNI has to analyze real threats. Are we comfortable with someone like that at the top of our national intelligence agencies?
Donald Trump's former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations slamming his pick for Director of National Intelligence, Nikki Haley, who, of course, took on Trump in the primary, but then ultimately endorsed him, criticized Tulsi Gabbard for meeting with Syria's Bashar al-Assad and argued that Gabbard repeated Russian talking points. Gabbard, a former Democrat, left the party in 2022, and she's since become a staunch supporter of Trump, serving on his transition team. If confirmed by the Senate, Gabbard would become the head of the nation's intelligence agencies. Her confirmation, though, might be an uphill battle.
If we bring in somebody like this, who smells to other intelligence agencies like someone who will compromise their sources and methods and be far too cozy with Russia and other adversaries, then they're going to hold back information that could be really critical to our success. This is a choice that actually puts Americans at risk because we won't have access to intelligence that could be critical to our safety. I think Republicans will likely begin to come around.
So this is one of those picks, Alex, that has, and Mike, you alluded to this, right? It's fallen kind of off out of the headlines in many ways because of the salacious things going on with other cabinet picks. But Tulsi Gabbard is someone who, and in fact, let me just play this. I talked to her back in 2019 about Bashar al-Assad, and I asked her if she thinks that he was an enemy of the United States. Here's what she said. Take a look. Do you think Assad is our enemy?
Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States.
Now, of course, why that comment and framing is noteworthy, especially in this context, is because of the ties between Assad and the Russians and the realities of where we are now. Is there a world where there is a national security contingent in the Senate that starts to take this nomination more seriously?
Yes, because she is one of the biggest critics of the current, not just national security state, but sort of American foreign policy establishment that you've had in many, many decades, perhaps, ever. Like the only thing I can even think close to is, the 70s post-Church Committee stuff. And that's why you're going to see people like Mitch McConnell take a very, very close look at her record. But, for Trump's base, the fact that she's getting criticized by Nikki Haley is a feature, not a bug. This is why people like Tucker Carlson and stuff have really gravitated towards Tulsi Gabbard, because they see her as sort of a wrecking ball to what they see as a national security state off the rails.
Yeah, well, and our reporting this morning, Mike, is that Tulsi Gabbard is at odds with the community she may soon be tasked with leading because of her distrust of broad government surveillance authorities and her support for those willing to expose some of the intelligence community's most sensitive secrets. I mean, the stakes here are incredibly high.
They are incredibly high. And to Alex's point, I think there's, some of the things that we forget when we're talking about these individuals being nominated is that there's a difference between a messenger and a manager. And I don't think that she's been nominated to be a manager of DNI. She's been nominated to be a messenger.
That doesn't mean that she wouldn't have the power, right?
Absolutely not. But we also forget that there are also a dozen other political nominees that will come in to each of these agencies to run it. But again, going back to the point, for not a feature, not a bug, she absolutely personifies a lot of what the Trump campaign was saying vis-a-vis the defense industry, but also the national intelligence. So I think a lot of these nominations, whether it be Gates at DOJ or Tulsi Gabbard, it's a way of the Trump administration is saying this time it's going to be different. Whether she makes it through, because there's a lot of hurdles for her to get through in the Senate, is another question.
The one thing I will say is I absolutely agree, because Donald Trump himself is the one who's been having phone calls with Vladimir Putin. I mean, so putting her there is not such a stretch. We're all talking about her as if she is in isolation. The fact that he is nominating her says a lot about Donald Trump's priorities and what he wants in that role. And that should be the concern.
And it's not new. Donald Trump was president before, and when he was, he actually sided in one instance with Vladimir Putin over our own intelligence services. Not to mention the fact that he himself has endangered national security. He is the president-elect. He gets to pick. But the pattern here is loyalists to Donald Trump and his agenda, and we should be very concerned about that when we're talking about national security.
Former presidential candidate Nikki Haley becoming the latest voice slamming former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence.
DNI, Department of National Intelligence. This is not a place for a Russian, Iranian, Syrian, Chinese sympathizer. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Tulsi Gabbard literally blamed NATO. Our Western alliance is responsible for countering Russia.
CNN's Katie Bo Lillis joining me now. Katie Bo, you've got some new reporting for us on Gabbard's history of really being at odds with the agencies that she could soon lead. What are you learning?
Yeah, Sarah, what's really fascinating about Gabbard is that if confirmed, she will be perhaps the most markedly or most publicly anti-surveillance official to ever lead the part of the U.S. government that is tasked with doing surveillance on foreign entities. In 2020, back when she was still a Democrat and she was in Congress, she introduced a series of bills that would have been pretty profoundly antithetical to how the intelligence community thinks. Two of them were aimed at persuading the government to drop its prosecution of Edward Snowden, the former National Security Agency contractor who revealed the existence of bulk NSA collection of Americans' data back in 2013, as well as of Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Both of these men are seen really as almost enemies of the state within the intelligence community, even as they've attracted some support from kind of the sort of libertarian wing of the Republican Party, as well as some progressives in the Democratic Party. Gabbard also in 2020 introduced this piece of legislation that would have wholesale repealed one of the most powerful surveillance authorities that the U.S. government has to spy on foreigners overseas, something called Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Now, that is legislation that has drawn some criticism from civil liberties advocates who say that it impinges on Americans' data privacy as well. But to wholesale repeal it without replacing it would be tantamount, according to some former U.S. intelligence officials, to effectively blinding the commander-in-chief. This is an authority under which as much as half of what's known as the president's daily brief is drawn from every day. So whether or not Gabbard as DNI would be able to actually kind of dismantle this program unilaterally, probably a really logistically difficult task that would face a lot of pushback. But it really speaks to this kind of profound distrust that she has in the intelligence community and the people that collect intelligence on foreign entities, and in ways that could potentially reshape the way the intelligence community gathers and spies. It gathers information and spies on American adversaries, Sarah.
All right, Katie Bo Lillis, thank you for that reporting.